Let's talk about 4 hidden messages in Andor Episode 3. They're all based on visual and verbal cues, such as chains, wires and tethers, the sun, and the orchestra. Episode 3 is amazing. It ties together a lot of the past motifs and themes and even takes them in new, interesting directions. This is why I love this show, how every episode slowly builds off of what came before it. Without further ado, let's get into the 4 hidden messages of Andor Episode 3. Chains. In Episode 3, Cassian and Luthen meet in an abandoned building containing a web of metal chains. Above them, the chains hold what look to be old engines or valuable metal parts. Eventually, Pre-Mor soldiers find them, and a fight ensues on the inside. For me, it was interesting they chose chains as the foundation of this location. Why not an assembly line? Why not a room full of scraps? Why not an actual furnace or forge? Because the filmmakers knew what they were doing here. Chains. Do we really need to think that hard about why chains are featured here? What significance do chains lend to this story? The Empire has their vice grip on the galaxy. Entire planets and systems are chained to their regime. The Empire isn't known to tolerate things like freedom and liberty. Chains here are a strong visual motif that back up this idea. I'm 100% positive the filmmakers thought about and implemented this design with intention. In one scene, Bix actually gets handcuffed to a metal bar and watches Tim get murdered by Pre-Mor soldiers. You can't tell me this isn't here for a reason. There's another way you might interpret these chains, though. Wires and tethers. Episode 3 of Andor tells 2 parallel stories. One of young Cassian being found by his mother and leaving Kenari, and one of older Cassian being found by Luthen and leaving Ferrix. In both stories, Cassian must cut ties with what came before in order to begin anew. It's weird because ties and tethers are all over Episode 3. Remember when the Pre-Mor ship flies up into the air, only to realize it's been tethered to a big piece of metal down below? Then it crashes? That's an incredible storytelling decision. Why didn't they just stick a piece of metal in the back thrusters? Why not bludgeon the controls with a mallet, thus making them unusable? The writers could have chosen so many different ways to destroy that ship, but they went with, oh, we'll just tie it up to an old piece of metal and make it crash. It's small decisions like these, when added up over time, that make me believe a detail as innocuous as this is actually something more. I had already thought wires could be a motif in this episode before this. What's Brasso doing with his team at the scrapyard? They're pulling gigantic arrays of wires out of a ship's bosom. Young Cassian, as he explores a Republic ship, is framed against so many cut wires, some of which let out sparks on occasion that scare him. And when Brasso comes over to talk to Cassian, we look through a gutted ship with cut wires carefully placed in the foreground. And if that's not enough for you, consider the chains again. In this scene, Cassian and Luthen shoot chains that loosen up their metal payloads above, which come crashing down to Earth, creating enough destruction to help them escape. At the beginning of the episode, a team of workers slice off a gigantic piece of metal from a ship, and overhead a transport vehicle delivers a big piece of metal held up by, you guessed it, tethers. And if you want to get really conspiracy theory crazy with this, consider the musical instruments being played at the end of the episode. Violins, a stringed instrument. I've made my case. It's up to you to decide whether you believe wires and tethers are a visual motif in Episode 3. The sun. We've already established in earlier episodes that fire and sparks are recurring motifs in Andor. It's fitting then that Episode 3 ends with young and old Cassian ascending past the clouds to see a beautiful orange sun there to meet them. What do suns do? They burn. They're big balls of gas that burn at ridiculous temperatures. Earlier in the episode, Cassian's mother explores the crashed Republic ship with B. B tells them,
"No detectable gas toxicity."
To which she says,
Whatever it was, it's burnt off. Just get your mask off.
Burning is a massive theme in Andor Episode 3. I'll go ahead and play, one by one, all the times a character mentions fire or burning.
Has Biggs ever burned you before?
Where does that go? Under the old furnace.
Special people are hard to find. I didn't want to see you tossed on the pyre.
And, make sure she keeps the heat on too.
East.
You know how cold she gets.
East.
Yes, the sun is a visual motif here, but it points to another, stronger motif we'll be better acquainted with later in this series. A new day. Remember what Luthen tells Andor?
These days will end, Cassian Andor. The way they laugh, the way they push through a crowd. The sound of that voice telling you to stop, to go, to move.
Later in the series, Luthen's going to give the monologue to end all monologues, where he says, "I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see." Again with burning, and again with the sun and a new day. Consider this scene right here, the beginning of a visual motif that runs parallel to the entire series. And guess what? I just realized that we haven't seen the bare sun one time so far in Andor. Every scene takes place on either a cloudy day or the pitch black of night. This is the first time in this series we've seen the sun, the Orchestra. In Episode 2, we were introduced to the most badass man in Star Wars banging on a metal drum with 2 metal mallets. In Episode 3, we get a scene where the residents of Ferrix bang on pieces of metal in a coordinated orchestra to warn Cassian of the Primor arrival. Marva tells the troops holding her hostage that it
gets to you, doesn't it?
Shut it.
That's what a reckoning sounds like.
I just wanted to update this motif. It's very much present in Episode 3 as well. Andor, the entire series, is an orchestra. It was in this episode I realized this is so much more than the sludge Lucasfilm has continued to put out the last few years. This is actual cinema. It's well written, well acted, and well designed, with an eye for telling a larger cinematic story through the entire series, with visual motifs and themes that keep coming up time and time again. It is without doubt the best Star Wars thing that's been released since The Empire Strikes Back, and if you want to get me to get real flagrant, it might just be the best Star Wars project ever released, period. I'll save that opinion for another video though. Like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to get more videos in this series. I'm reviewing every episode of Andor for more motifs and themes in the coming weeks. I hope you join me. Bye bye for now. I'll see you next time.